Hi, this is Dr. Neil Boumpani. Welcome to my channel, Your Child's Education, where I try to help parents help their children to get a good education, in spite of the failure of the American public school system. Today I'm going to give parents a quick guide to understanding educational research, how it works, what it can tell us, and how it could be used and misused. First, if you like any of my videos, please like, subscribe, ring the bell. Also, please visit my website at www.yourchildseducation.com for more posts, comments, and as it grows, hopefully serious discussions will take place. Okay, let's start. Originally, this explanation was going to be part of another video. However, I started to realize that the other video was getting a little too long, and I might have to include this explanation in other videos, so I decided just to create its own separate video. Now, you may have come here to this video because one of my other videos referred you here, or maybe you just wanted to know more about research. In any case, I will try to make this as painless as possible. About research. For decades, research has held an important place in influencing educational policies. Most colleges and universities expect professors to undertake educational research and publish articles in professional journals. Professors are expected to do this to earn tenure and seek promotion. This is known as the publish or perish doctrine of higher education. Many excellent research studies have contributed in helping educators improve instruction. Still, sometimes research findings can be questionable at best and simply fraudulent at worst. A statistics professor, and I can't remember his name, I apologize, from my undergraduate alma mater, once published a book explaining how research findings can be, quote-unquote, fixed to support a desired outcome, even when legitimate research would show contradictory results. In spite of this, there are still a great many reliable research projects and findings. Okay, the purpose of this video is to explain to parents the research process in plain everyday terms to help them make the best educational choices for their children. First, the kind of research that examines the hows and whys of human behavior is considered research in the social sciences. Research in education is considered social science research. When research findings in the social science are discussed, the results never prove anything. Now, in the physical sciences, researchers can prove that when water is heated beyond 212 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll turn to steam. However, if someone researched what the effects might be on test scores of students if they sat in a steam-filled room for an hour before taking that test, well, that would be considered social science research and therefore can never prove anything. The reason for this is because social science research can't account for the many known and unknown human variables that may affect the outcome of any study. No matter how careful the researchers may be, there's simply no way to account for everything. Now, careful research conditions and advanced mathematical computations can produce an outcome that diminishes the effect of these variables, but never enough to prove anything. Therefore, if you ever hear anyone in education tell you that research studies prove something, you need to be wary, or better yet, call them out on it. Fictional study. To better understand how researchers come to their conclusions in social science research, I'm going to create a fictional study, and I'm going to explain this as simply and clearly as possible. I'm going to call this The Effects of Italian Opera Arias on the Speaking and Reading Abilities of First-Year Italian Language Students. Yes, research studies have screwy titles, and they're just not very inviting. Let's say I want to improve the Italian speaking and reading abilities of ninth grade students who are in their first year of the study of the Italian language. I make an assumption that if students were to listen to an Italian opera aria at the beginning of each Italian class, it might improve the students' abilities to speak and read Italian. Now, to test this assumption and get valid results, I must carefully plan a research study. So I will set up two classes, both classes having the same amount of instruction prior to the study. The class that will hear the Italian opera aria each day will be the test group. The other class will be called the control group. Now, to avoid listening fatigue, I'll select 5 or 6 arias that are played randomly from day to day. I wouldn't play the same one each day because students will just turn that off quick. I'll set a 4-week time frame for the study, followed by a comprehensive test. I will begin this research after the first semester of instruction, so that the test class may actually understand a few words of what they're hearing in the arias. Okay, before I begin my study, I must establish my hypothesis. Hypothesis is a statement of what effects the research study will have on my test class. I'm going to assume for the best. My hypothesis might be students who listen to Italian opera arias before beginning the standard daily classes in Italian will demonstrate greater gains in Italian reading and speaking abilities than students who only receive the standard daily lessons. Now, in some studies, you might hear a researcher present a null hypothesis. Don't let this confuse you. It's not necessary to know the difference between the two. We're just talking about research. Okay, before the study, I would administer the same test to each class and carefully record the results. So, at the conclusion of the study, each student's progress will be tested, the results recorded. Using the pre- and post-test scores, the data would be subjected to statistical equations that will take into account as many variables as possible. Eventually, the equations would yield a numerical value that will include a margin for error. The results would allow me to either confirm my hypothesis or reject it. If the results support my hypothesis, I then publish my findings in the following manner. Research findings suggest that listening to an Italian opera aria at the beginning of each Italian language class can improve students' speaking and reading abilities in Italian. Now, regardless of the final data, even if the grades of the test class were like 50% higher than those of the control class, the research findings can only suggest that the hypothesis is valid. It can never prove anything. Just a quick aside here. When you hear political polls, so-and-so is leading so-and-so by 8 points, there's an error of plus or minus 3 points. Well, that's when I talk about error, and we have that in social science research as well. Let's examine how research findings can be misleading. There are many ways we can be misled by research findings. All research begins with certain assumptions. Now, an honest researcher needs to base as many assumptions as possible on fact, not on ideology. If the assumptions are based on personal beliefs or ideology, the research results may be skewed, misleading others to come to a conclusion that may not be valid. Another cause for misleading results occurs when a researcher purposely ignores or even changes certain variables in order to support the hypothesis. Let's take my fictional Italian study. Had I not tested classes prior to the study and just assumed both classes were equal in abilities, the results would be questionable at best. Now, if I knew that the control class was far behind the test class in abilities to begin with, and I decided not to pre-test classes, I could be relatively positive that the research results would support my hypothesis. Results might even hide the fact that both classes may have demonstrated equal improvement. When research findings are published using words that replace the word suggests for words that give the findings a little more clout, it can be very misleading. Statements like, the research clearly demonstrates, or the research conclusively shows, or the research is conclusive, or even once in a while when you hear the research proves. These can all be misleading, and people could believe that what they're hearing is factual evidence, just like water boiling and turning into steam. All right. Educational decisions can be, and probably have been, made based on such misleading research. One can only wonder how many students have been affected by misleading research. However, it turns out that there's something even worse than biased research taking place today. We'll examine that shortly. How research is validated. Before looking at the latest educational scams, I want parents to understand how to follow credible research. Research findings gain credibility when other researchers replicate the original study and come to similar results. Research findings can lose credibility when replicated studies report findings that are contradictory. It only makes sense that serious educators would rely on the findings of replicated research studies before endorsing any new policies or procedures. There are enough valid research studies to guide the education of our youth, if only those making the decisions would actually take time to study the research. Of course, when politicians and ideologues are the ones making decisions that affect your children's education, the best research may simply be ignored. Let's get to the worst case scenario, though. Yes, it gets worse when educational leaders ignore the best research or simply create programs without any research. We seem to have arrived at a point in our country's history where educational policies are being made that either ignore research or simply have no basis in research whatsoever. For example, Common Core math was pushed into our public schools, and the children were told that 2 plus 2 can equal 5 if that's what the child wanted. Now, most people did not know that there was absolutely no research into the effects of Common Core math approaches and how they might affect our children's math abilities. More recently, critical race theory was thrust into our public schools without any supporting research into the effects of the program. I'll be addressing CRT in a separate set of posts. And now we are subjecting kindergartners to confusing gender issues that they're too young to understand. There are no long-term studies on the effects these subjects might have on young children. The schools are basically they're using our children as human guinea pigs. Again, I'll discuss these in a separate post. Many parents already know that what is happening in our public schools is endangering an entire generation of our youth. Some parents do try to fight back, but they're not only ignored when they address principals or school boards, they're even labeled terrorists by President Biden. Are parents not supposed to be concerned when males use their daughters' bathrooms and showers? Are parents of all races not concerned about the hate that CRT is spreading? What do we say to a child who comes home crying because that child has been labeled a racist? We consider that these programs were forced into our public schools without debate or discussion. What might we expect next? This is not how democracy is supposed to work. This all leads to the question: if research is continually finding better ways of educating our youth, why are our schools continuing to fail year after year? Why are literacy levels plummeting? Everyone should be asking these questions. I'm pretty sure I've made my beliefs clear, but you'll have to come to those conclusions for yourself. Okay, conclusions for this video. The purpose of this video was to explain how research works, how it's used, and how it's misused. As you seek ways to help your child, do not be afraid to look into research, but consider the things I've explained above. If you homeschool your children, be careful if you come across homeschooling products that claim their methods are based on proven research. Remember, social science research never proves anything. Well, I hope you'd enjoy this, and if you have, please subscribe, ring the bell, and all that stuff, and please visit my website at www.yourchildseducation.com. Thank you very much.